welcome everybody back to my YouTube channel, where today we're going to be going through a game that I played against the Danya chess bot. I did a video yesterday about it, but today we actually are going to beat him. So I'm going to walk you through this game. I'm on the white pieces and he's on the black pieces. So we're just going to start off with the very casual king pawn opening, and then he goes for the French defense. And I just continue developing my pawns until he does the, of course, Cairo Khan, expecting to win tempo. So I just close the center, and then he brings another pawn, doing essentially wanting to do this, and then have another attack. So to avoid this, I just put the knight here, because if he goes here now, and then I take, and he takes, at least then there will be a knight which will be able to just keep it at bay. So then that is what the series that happens. But instead of first trap again, I simply just develop out my bishop. Sort of threatening to castle. Well, it's not really a threat, but I'm going to castle. Unless he does something really big brain. So then I kind of just continue my development. Develops. And now all he has to do is move his queen to get a queenside castle. And then I keep pushing this pawn, because he's on his way to just victory. The knight comes out, the pawn comes out, booting the knight, and the knight comes in and blocks the pawn. So I just take with the bishop that was all the way on the side of the map. And now if he takes, at least he'll have a messed up pawn structure, and of course it is what happens. Now his pawn structure is really messed up. Although he does have a free, now he's able to go a lot more places with the bishop. And the knight comes out. I'm essentially I'm going for a queenside castle here, because the kingside rook is essentially going to be supporting this entire pawn pyramid here with the knight. So after the rook moves, and my rook moves, now I'm going to be supporting these pawns, this pawn and this knight, which are going to go in for the attack. And what? Oh wait, that was actually a miss that I made. The rook went here. And then the pawn pushed. So I actually didn't want to take here, because then he would have a rook, and then he would just be winning a rook, and my knight would be in a lot worse place. So I'm just like, okay, I'll just take an en passant. Then the queen comes out, bishop comes out, and he castles queenside. So I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna go castle queenside. And then after he moves the bishop, that's exactly what I do. Pawn takes, and then bishop takes this knight. Chess actually said that this was a great move, because after he takes back, now I can take with the knight, and now, of course, this is just not an attack, unless you're really dumb. Nobody's going to actually take this knight. Although he does still have a 0.4 advantage going on. So the bishop comes back, queen comes out with a check, king has to go back, of course, and then I move my king out. Essentially, I don't want... When my king is here, any piece like a queen taking this rook would just be checkmate, because this rook has plans to go other places, of course. So I'm like, oh, okay, and then I can even have a valid excuse to start making development to give my king an escape space. And then the bishop moves, knight moves out. Essentially, I'm like, okay, you get a knight, I get a bishop. Which would actually be an upgrade for me, because bishops are slightly more valuable than knights, even though they have the same point value. So that's exactly what happened. I take back, and then the rook comes in with this little pawn capture, and which is actually chess said this was a brilliant move, because if I take here, then I forgot what the evaluation said, but essentially it would make me completely losing, and with some kind of like forced mate 13. That's what the evaluation said. And so after we have this little rook trade, the queen comes out with a check. So I move my king back again. Of course, this is not mate, because either I can take or I can take. So then the bishop comes in with a little attacking the rook. So rook comes essentially trying to just pin the bishop to the queen. Of course, he breaks his pin, taking this free pawn with another brilliancy. So I push my pawns, because eventually, if this rook ever does take, I want my king to have some kind of escape. And also, yes, on this move, this bishop is not free, because say I take, then this is just checkmate, because after this, it's just checkmate. So of course I'm not going to do that. And so after I put the pawn up, the bishop comes back, the rook comes over, reiterating that attack on the bishop. So now the bishop comes, and now I once again see this pinning of the bishop to the queen, which is very nice. Then he just decides to push the pawn because there's no really other good move. Now my king comes up. Once again, there's no checkmate threat here, and the knight will eventually, the knight or pawn is gonna get out of there. So then the pawn moves and the knight moves, and now there is a threat for this, which would fork the rook and the king. He didn't want that, so he moves over the rook. So I move over my queen, and after the rook comes in, attack the queen, because the idea here was, of course, to fork the rook and the pawn. So then he moved down the rook, protecting the pawn while also being protected. I said I'm just going to move out my queen. Now there is another attack here. Very nice. So the rook comes back, and I actually just realized this is not an attack. There was a queen. I guess I'm a lot smarter when I'm actually playing the game. So then the pawn is pushed. Queen comes in, offering a queen trade. I decline, instead taking this free pawn. Bishop comes out, and now we see a very funny form of a queen trade, because I do this, forking the knight and the queen, and say he takes, then of course I just come in and take. So he decides he'll move the king. I take the queen, and then he takes my queen. A very funny form of a queen trade. And so then I just take this bishop, because of course now I'm just up 1 point of material, even though that is a full bishop. Last move I was down 2 because I was down 2 pawns. And I'm up 1. He attacks the knight, so I actually ignore this with a little check, because now he can't take the knight, of course. And then the knight comes back with another check of its own. King comes over, and now the king is moving up. The king, in this moment, I'm actually thinking about activating the king and maybe getting an avalanche on these pawns. So that he notices that, and now I'm not getting there. Of course, there's no way of here. So the king is kind of locked in here. So now my plans have been disabled. So that's kind of a blunder for me, not a full blunder, but a mistake. So the king comes out, rook comes over. This isn't actually an attack. I know there's going to be a lot of people thinking this is an attack. This is not an attack. Now I'm deciding, okay, I can't go here. So I gotta start rerouting the king. And the rook comes in attacking the knight, although the knight is just protected. But if he takes, then I take, and then I'm down a knight and a rook for a rook. So I'll be just be down 1 material again. So then I decide, okay, I'm just gonna move the knight out of the way with a little check. King comes down. I know the knight is just gonna get basically deactivated for the time. Pawn comes. I decide to trade the pawns. And now the king is going to continue its rerouting. Pawn comes, rook comes with a little check. King has to move, and now the pawn takes. The reason why I couldn't just take here, say I would have taken here. Now, the way that I like to see it is if the pawn is 4 squares away, then as long as the king is within 4 squares, it will be able to make it, and the king is in these 4 squares. So now, if the king is over here, well now if I take, and he goes here, well then there's just the rerouting of the knight, while blocking this little check. I wasn't actually anticipating for a check to come. And now the kings are going to block, and now I just get this free pawn. And now I'm up 4 points of materials against Danya. How does that happen? Remember, this bot is supposed to be the former chess youth champion, although I don't actually think that it's coded like this. I'm sure that if he was watching this video, he would be very disappointed in his bot. So then he takes this pawn, and now essentially I'm going to go here, allowing for my pawn to just have a free row while also forcing the king to move. And after the rook comes out, essentially saying, yeah, you're not going to get your pawn past this point. Whoops. You're not going to get your pawn past this point. He doesn't actually, I don't think he anticipated that this pawn hasn't moved yet, so it's going to be able to move too as long as this king is out of the way. So now I'm essentially just going to start buffing up. The king and the knight are going to be teaming up to keep the black king at bay. And after the rook comes, thinking that he is pinning the knight to the king, I just have this check. now forking the king and the pawn. Instead, after I take this pawn, I will also be protecting the knight. So that is very nice. So yeah, he has to move. Now I take the last of his pawns. Now I'm up a knight and a pawn, which is just absolutely amazing. These knight and these pawn, the knight is going to be very helpful, but not as nearly as helpful as the pawn. So king moves, rook moves, and now the king is going to start going up. Essentially, his idea is that as long as he can station the king here, then even say if the king somehow got over here and there's a pawn, then at least he could stalemate. But I'm just like, okay, I'm going to start pushing, and I don't actually have to move two. I don't have to move two because there's no rook here anymore. And even if there was, there would just be a dead rook there. So then the rook comes over, and I push again. King comes. I actually don't want to trade rooks here, because then, of course, I'm going to need the rook for the checkmate I have planned for this guy. So rook comes over with a check of my own. King moves, and now we have this. The knight is essentially preventing the king from getting in the way of the pawn. So, whoops. Now the pawn is guarding these squares, and the knight is guarding this square. So, king is going to have to be stuck behind the ranks, and after I can say reroute the rook, then, of course, he would also be stuck behind these ranks. And then knight and pawn can be pushed. So, essentially, I'm just going to slowly work the black king back until I can promote this pawn. So he moves the right out, of course, thinking that I'm going to pre-move and go here, because then he can just take. Of course, I'm not going to pre-move in this game. It's too valuable. I've gone too far. I have a 5.2 advantage. 5.4 now. So then the rook comes up with a little check. King moves. Knight moves. And the rook is moving now. So the reason why the rook is moving is, I forgot what the term is called, but essentially, black has no good moves. That, like, all of his moves will basically throw the game, so he just has to do a random rook move. Because, I mean, even if I go here now, like, there's really no attack here because rook can come over. It just, so he's just doing a move that won't throw the game, essentially. So I'm gonna start bringing up the king, allowing for it to help the pawn move up, and then the rook just goes back. King moves forward. King moves back, knowing his fate. Then the knight is going to reroute. The knight is planned to reroute and hopefully get him to want to trade rooks. Because the knight will then protect a rook from going here, so then if I can get the rook, and if I can trade off the rooks, I still have a knight and a pawn. I'm going to win, essentially. Now I have a plus 12 advantage. So now the pawn is once again guarding this, and all these are guarded, and then of course, if you don't even want to ignore that, then the rook is just guarding it. So king's going to have to fall back. And of course, it's what he does. So I give a check, he moves, and then I push the pawn again. Now I don't want to push the pawn, because then he takes, and then even if I somehow maybe rerouted the knight to go, say I rerouted the knight to go here so that I could at least take back. I'm absolutely terrible at rook endgames, like how to checkmate with a rook. So I didn't want that. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna try to find a way to get this rook out of here. And then the rook falls back, so I'm like, okay, now we're really just going to solidify that this pawn is going. And then after the rook comes, essentially like pointing a pistol at the back of this pawn's head, the pawn just pushes. It pushes on. Because now, with the king's position, if he takes, there's just a checkmate here. With the king moving around, essentially guarding these squares. So I don't even need the pawn, and of course the ending even says that I have a force checkmate in 12. I'm probably not going to see that. Then the king moves down, rook moves over, essentially offering a rook trade. If he takes, that'll be absolutely fatal, because then he will have absolutely nothing. If he takes, I'd take back with the king. If I would have taken back with the knight, then the king could go here, forking the knight and the pawn, and it would just be over. So I take back with the king, also now preventing the king from going over. So now the king is just basically stuck behind the c file. So the d and h, that's all their space. So then the king has to move back. I promote to a good old queen, and then the king comes down. Queen moves over, solidifying some protection of this knight. King comes over. Knight comes over. Remember, it is all still protected, and you just want to hear this. I have mate in 3, and I'm actually going to see this mate in 3 because after the king moves, and my king moves. Now I just want you to understand every single occupied square. Just keep this in mind. And now all of these squares are occupied. The king can't go here or here. The king can't go here. And of course they just can't reach here. So they have one legal move. After they play it, we have queen f7 checkmate. Let's go. I thought that this was actually going to take a lot more games, although this did take me I think 15 attempts to get this checkmate on him. And if you want to prove, the queen is just guarding everything. The king is guarding things. There's no space for the king. This is just dead. Everything's dead here. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. I think I'm going to end the Destroying Danya series just because, I mean, we destroyed him now. We did it. After only episode 2. So we're going to start a new series, probably on a different chess bot. Maybe. I was going to do one on mittens, but then they had to remove mittens. So sad. So now, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.